Well, sometimes how you're like in a conversation or something, and or maybe you're like, this happens in movies a lot too. Like sometimes you're just going along your merry way, and all of a sudden, like something happens, like something that just like really unexpected happens, kind of like jarring almost, right? You're like kind of this feeling of like, well, where did that come from, right? What happened? What? We were just doing this thing, and then all of a sudden something just gets inserted, and as Lainey has already mentioned, it was her 15th birthday. Yay! So that's great. We got two claps. What a day. So, 2 in 1, exactly. So it just had me reminded about some of the earlier days of her life, and there's a really famous video which I won't show here because it'll just be too distracting, honestly. But it's just too cute. But she was like maybe, I don't know, she's maybe like 9 months old or something, and her mom is holding her, and they're just videoing themselves. They're singing "Jesus Loves Me," right? And they're saying this really, it's just super cute. Jesus loves me, this I know, just going through the whole thing. And then like she's smiling the whole time. It's just really interesting. She's really having a great time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this like plastic straw emerges into the picture. And it's just like a toy, like just one of these like things that you build with. And this plastic straw emerges, and she like very distinctly stops singing. And she looks at her mom, and she stabs her in the chest with this plastic straw. In the neck, there we go. She pokes her in the neck. And it's a very famous video in our family because it is very surprising. That's not a thing that we saw coming in it. It's hilarious, and it's very funny. But I was thinking about things like that, right? Because there are these times, right, when things happen and really like the jarring, surprising, the turn, the twist, if you will, right? That is the thing that actually kind of captures a moment, right? And so, if you've been around with us these last couple of weeks, we've been going through just really, as we've described it, as I'll talk a little bit more about, just taking a breath using Psalm 139. And we've been reading like the whole thing, okay? And if you have been part of that, just taking it in. Usually we've been all very quiet as we are reading it through or just hearing it, a lot of times just absorbing it. And last week, I don't know if the Browns are, I don't know if the Browns are here, but Elizabeth Brown, who I think is like 10, she actually read the whole psalm for us. And she's super, super bright, super sweet girl, and she's just up here with her mic just doing an awesome job reading it through. And then, I don't know, maybe it was because it was her, right? And it's so sweet. I don't know if you noticed, but we ran into this section of the psalm, and I'm going to actually put it in the version that she read it. Everything's going great, and then all of a sudden it says, you have so many thoughts about me. This is part of the wonderful part, right? That I cannot understand them all. There are too many for me to count, more than the sand on the shore of the sea. Even if I finished counting them, you would still be there, right? This is just lovely, wonderful thoughts. And then it says, God, you should surely destroy the wicked people. Yes, you murderers, leave me alone. Those people say bad things against you, God. Your enemies always tell lies. And if that wasn't enough, it keeps going. Lord, I hate those who hate you. I have no time for them who turn against you. Yes, I really hate them. Your enemies are my enemies too, right? And then it ends up with another favorite part of the psalm. Please, God, look deep inside of me, see what thoughts there are. Show me if I'm following an evil way. Lead me in the right way. That has always been true, right? So it's kind of bookends around there, and that's how it ends. So I don't know about you, but like I knew that was coming, right? Just like when I watch this video of Lainey every time, it's like, I know it's coming. I mean, I read the psalm lots of times, but even like last week, again, maybe it was just because it was Elizabeth, but she's like, when she got to that part, and she just went right through it, right? I was like, whoa, where did that come from, right? And part of me, even though, like, again, I knew exactly what Emily was going to be talking about. I knew I would be talking next week, but part of me was like, is someone going to talk about the elephant in the room here? That like there's this thing that's sitting here in the middle, and what are we supposed to do with that, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning. before we get there, I want to just zoom out a little bit on sort of why we're here and where we are, what the context is. And so Danielle did this thing the first week, which I was really kind of shocked by. She referenced our little description that we write for these series, like in the teaching. And I thought that was, I was shocked by that. I don't think we've ever done that before. But I thought it was a great idea, so I'm going to do that again. So this is what this said, and this will just help us zoom out a little bit, get a little bit context for where we're coming from. It said, in the midst of our busy and chaotic world, and I'll just stop right there, right? We have a busy and chaotic world. And busy, like I would say, not just busy like in the sense that we're just running around doing stuff, just kind of the idea of like, I don't know, just the day-to-day life. I mean busy, like there's like a lot of things going on in our lives, right? A lot of things, as we talked about a couple times, that there's a lot of transition happening for our church together in our lives. But even I was just thinking about even in this Sunday morning space, like just even in the last 9 months or so here, year to date, and so far in 2025, we've been busy. We've been doing a lot of things. We've been digging a lot, I would say. We started the year kind of in the last section of the series called More Than Nice, where we were talking about how loving one another is about more than just like being like kind and like more than just putting on a good face. It's like there's actually a lot of depth, a lot of challenge in being able to love one another. So, that was pretty simple, I guess. We all figured out how to love one another better. No, it's like a process, right? And then we went into, before Easter, we had a series out of Hebrews, which had like all this depth to it about Jesus and who he is and why it is that we can look at him and look to him. And again, just a lot of depth there. And then we had, after Easter, we talked about being poor in spirit, which is just this really simple idea that, we are utterly and totally dependent on God for everything. So which is something that I'm sure we all have down pat, that we just can just rely on him totally. There's a lot of work in these things, a lot of digging, so to speak, right? And then even in our summer series that we just had before here about Did You Catch That? We'd actually kind of envisioned that a little bit to be a little bit lighter, actually, like a little bit more like, oh yeah, we'll just kind of talk about just stories about how God speaks to people. And, as it turns out, as we were going through that, it was like that too was a lot of just expanding our imagination for the ways that God could speak. It was speaking in a lot of different ways and just kind of pointing out some ways in which we maybe need to actually work, again, on how we hear God. And so it ended up kind of not also being totally light. It was also kind of busy in the sense of work, right? There was a lot of stuff in that. And that was just like the teaching series. On top of that, you might remember if you've been around, we've been in this thing called a pastoral transition. And for pretty much all of June and July, we spent time on Sunday mornings talking through a lot of what that meant. We actually have all of that information. It's all gathered up for us on VCC Life about the transition team. You probably have missed a bunch of that, or some of that anyways. It's tough for everybody to be here every week, and so we gather that all together. There's like a lot of content. I was looking at that. There was a lot of things that we were saying that because we're trying to process those things as a community, right? And then on top of that, we did something we've never done before, which is we had a full season, 9 episodes and an intro episode of a podcast where all of us who are on pastoral council and on transition team, we talked through the story of the transition team, which there's a lot there too. So there's a lot of things. And then we had this retirement weekend with David and Debbie, right? Which, if you were here for that was also a lot. There was a lot of activity, but there was a lot that was coming up also emotionally, and really, I think for a lot of us, just actually recognizing, this thing that we've been sort of looking forward to in the sense that like it's this fixed point in time that we've been heading towards. Now it's finally here, right? And that idea of like actually moving beyond that, and how do we let go of the way that David had started our church and led it in that way. And it's a lot, right? There's a lot to digest, a lot to chew through, a lot to work on. And, I know, like, I know if I was like, I'm in the middle of so many things, but I know if I were sitting kind of more from just this standpoint of like absorbing, like just trying to take it all in, I would feel probably a little overwhelmed by all of it, right? And so it's been busy. It's been busy for us as a community. It's also been, the world has been chaotic. It always is, but it always seems like it's particularly chaotic. And we've had a bunch of events in our world, even in the last couple of weeks, that have felt super chaotic. And then you've got your own lives, of course, and all the things that you're going through, right? So it is in the context of a busy and chaotic world that we felt God inviting us to take a breath, to really take a breath. And see, the thing about that is we were actually ready to just keep plowing on. We were ready to keep moving on into our next series, which, by the way, is also going to be work. There's going to be some substantive challenge in where we're heading next, and I won't say anything more than that about it, but Daniel will be here next week to help orient us. Thank you. And it will be, there'll be some challenge to it. It's going to be really, really good. It's going to be really good. We believe God is going to do some really good things in it. But it won't be a breath. That's what it won't be. But God is inviting us to take a breath. We felt that Him really stop us from going forward before we did that. I think in part because one of the things He's been teaching us as a community is how to sort of have these rhythms of work and rest, right? That God, if you really want things to really sink in, if you really want transformation in your life, if you really want Him to speak in ways that are transforming you in deep ways to become more like Christ, you actually need to have both work and purpose and also rest. And so that's kind of what these 3 weeks have been about. And Danielle did a great job of giving us a ton of space the first week. If you missed that, you could just or actually even if you didn't, you could just use that as like a devotional time. There's just lots of silence and reflection and just space to breathe. And then last week, Emily helped us to actually approach it in a different way, like kind of playfully and with the kids in here and using our imaginations and actually in a way that was embodied, right? Like that we recognize that our physical beings are tied into how we are doing. Which she did that in such a playful way that it could be lost on us, just the profound point of that. It's like a hard-fought lesson to understand that actually our bodies and what we're doing physically matters a great deal to how we are as humans in total and how we hear God, how we absorb what He has to say. And so this morning, I'm going to take yet a slightly different approach to it. And I can kind of already feel, right? Like a breath does not last forever, right? It's like we're kind of coming out of it already. We had this sort of stopping point, and we're sort of starting to just inhale again. That's what this morning, I think, is going to feel like. There's going to be a little bit of work in it, but I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum. But it is going to feel a little bit more like that, okay? So this section, this is the rest of it. To exhale and to be reminded that God, He is God and we are not. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So this section here, I just want to get you ready for it a little bit better, okay? So we're going to read the whole thing. We're going to read it a little bit differently in a little bit. But I just want to, at the risk of doing too much, okay, which would be easy for me to do, but we're just going to talk through this. And let me just put the whole thing up there. I'm switching translations here. This is a part of the psalm that would just be easy to ignore, right? In fact, we were tempted to. We felt like we wanted about 3 weeks for the series. The psalm is broken up by a lot of biblical translations into sections of 6 verses. So, 1 week, verses 1 through 6. Next week, 7 through 12. Next week, 13 through 18. And we're done. Yay. That's it, right? And we could just throw this out. We can just ignore this part. But there's some problems with that. Besides the fact that we believe in the whole counsel of God, there is about at least 15 to 20 psalms out of 150 that scholars would call imprecatory. Okay, this is a big word. But all it means is that these are psalms where the psalmist is recognizing some injustice or evil or really at the heart of it is really rebellion against God in some way. Sometimes those are things that the psalmist is experiencing for themselves personally. Sometimes that's things that they're observing in the world. But these are petitions, imprecations that the psalmist is putting into words, putting into song, putting into poetry, that are actually petitioning God to do something about the things that they're seeing in the world. And so about 15 to 20 of these psalms are really, really directly kind of jarring almost. Kind of feel like, I don't know how this fits exactly with the God of love and the things that we recognize about how Jesus wants us to love our enemies and things like that, right? If they're kind of jarring, you don't really know where to put them. And then probably another 10 on top of that are maybe Psalm 139 would be kind of part of it. It's not the main thing, it's content-wise, it's not the main thing, but it's definitely in there. You can recognize it, right? And then there's probably another 10 to 15 psalms where it's just implied, right? These imprecations, they're maybe not, the language is maybe not as strong in this, but they're generally implied. So really all told, there's at least about 45 to 50 psalms out of 150 that have imprecations of some kind that sound just a little bit like this. And so if we're going to ignore these, we're going to be ignoring a third of the Psalms, which is probably not great if you believe, again, in the whole counsel of Scripture. We don't want to do that. It's tempting to do that. C.S. Lewis, for all his brilliance and all the many, many things, great things that he contributed, that was actually his approach. He just decided that, no, we don't really want to deal with those. But I don't think we have to do that, actually. That's the good news. I think God actually put these here on purpose, and there's a reason for them. And actually, as I was sitting with this week, and there's so much more we could say about this. It's been a good week for me personally as a teacher. Nobody gets more out of teaching than the teacher. It's been a great week of just sitting in this concept and hearing God about it. And I've got resources, by the way, if you're interested in learning more. I've got some good resources for that. But when I was sitting specifically with this psalm, here's what I felt like Jesus said to me, just kind of as an invitation or maybe as a question, as a curiosity. What he said was, what if these verses are actually the whole point of this psalm? What if these verses were the whole point? Not the point from a theological or teaching standpoint, but I mean the reason why this psalm was written. The motivation that the psalmist had for sitting down, for David to sit down and write this thing that would stand up in front of the whole community and through time. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's obviously stood through all of time. What if the motivation for writing that was actually contained in these verses? These verses within Psalm 39, they are the only place where he's actually asking for something. This is the only place where he's petitioning, right? Where he's calling on God for something. The rest of the psalm is all really, really lovely, but they're all sort of just recognizing good things about God, about us, about how God relates with us, how he creates with us. They're recognitions, as we would say around here, good noticings. We say that here all the time now. But they're not petitions. This is the only place, and in the next two verses also, right? This section is the only place where he's actually asking God for something. And so I think maybe, just maybe, this is actually the whole reason why he sat down to write it in the first place. The next couple of verses talk, as many of you know, about that he might have some anxious thoughts. And he might have some offensive ways in him, right? And he wants God to search those out. But really, the height of the emotion of this is really in these verses where he is recognizing that actually there is some people in the world, there are things in the world that are opposed to God. You might call that injustice. You might call that oppression. You might call that evil. You might just call that, I think, at the root of it is just this rebellion against God that actually every one of us has and that we can see in the world at large, right? We live with those things. Things that make us angry. Things that make us wonder what in the world is going on. Things that are hard to deal with, right? That's part of the human experience. That is part of the world that we're in. And so the psalmist is recognizing, very honestly here and in many, like I said, many other places in the Psalms, that, man, there are things that are against God in this world, and they are not good. They are not good. They are not good. They are injustice, and they are evil, they are oppression, they're just disorder. Disorder against the kingdom, rule, and reign that God has. And so I think that he is laying this out in a way that actually helps us give voice to the things that we feel when we run across those situations, right? And I know, you're here in church. You probably weren't thinking when you came in here, we're going to just spend some time thinking about all the things that make us mad. That probably wasn't your morning coming in. But we're going to do just a little bit of that, okay? And I want to offer this as maybe a template, as maybe a tool for as you carry on in your lives, that when you do run across things, whether it's in your own heart or whether it's in your experience of life, in your, whatever is going on in each of your lives, and I know there are many things where you're seeing, right, the chaos, the disorder of the world personally, or whether you're just watching the news and you're seeing all the crazy things that happen day in and day out, that maybe as those feelings are coming up, that maybe this is a little bit of a model for us to be able to go to God. All right, because what's happening in this whole psalm as we read it, and I'm going to read it a little differently than we have before. I'm going to read it with some more emotion, maybe at a faster pace. I'm going to kind of frame it in that way to help us to see that all the things that are happening before in the psalm are actually a really perfect setup. They're really, really perfect setup to be in God's presence, to be recognizing even some of the tensions that we have with God that turn out to be good and turn out to be comforting. But these things that are happening in our relationship with God, to recognize them, to see them, so that when we get here to verse 19, and we're carrying in these things that are upsetting, that are angering, that there's a way to do that, okay? And so, we're going to look at it like this. We're going to think just a little bit about what happens in you when you see or experience injustice and evil or some kind of rebellion against God, okay? We're going to, in a minute, we're going to take like 30 seconds. And I actually don't want to dwell on that. I'm not going to give us a lot of time to come up with that. If nothing comes up for you readily, I would just say, just take this tool with you for the next time that it happens, okay? Because it will, obviously. But my object this morning is not to try to stir it up, or in any way. Just like if there's something that comes right up to you, maybe you already know, as I'm talking about. We're just going to notice what happens when we see or experience that. And then what we're going to just model and exercise this morning is how the psalm could help us with that, okay? And so we're just going to do that by what I will do now, which is to read and just kind of get ourselves into the psalm, okay? So I'm just going to give us like 10, 15 seconds here, again, to just with that first one. Just think about what happens in you when you think and experience things like that. And so with that in mind, let's just take a big, like Danielle helped us do, let's just take a big collective breath. And we'll just listen. Oh Lord, you've examined my heart, and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down and stand up. You know when my thoughts, even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say, even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to the heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night. But even in the darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in the utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the darkness of the womb. You saw me even before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of the sand, and when I wake up, you are still with me. Oh God, if only you would destroy the wicked. Get out of my life, you murderers. They blaspheme you. Your enemies misuse your name. Oh Lord, should I hate those who hate you? Should I despise those who oppose you? Yes, I hate them with total hatred, for your enemies are my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Let's just take another moment here. And just notice how you're feeling with that. You can go ahead and open your eyes. I think part of what God is wanting to communicate with us as we use a psalm like that, as we pray something like that, as we recognize these things. And again, you can learn a lot more about how these things can work, how to think about these types of psalms. But I think one of the big things that he wants us to know as we're in these spaces is what we said at the end of our description, which is that you are God and I am not. And so just as we get ready to transition here into worship, we're going to just practice that as what we call a breath prayer, okay? So here's Psalm 139. Here's this long form model for what we can do to exhale, to take a breath, to when we are feeling angry, how we can approach Jesus honestly and with our whole selves. But in short form, like almost just in moments, in little things that you repeat, that's what a breath prayer is like. One thing that we can just recognize is that you are God and I am not.